Welcome, everyone, to our Artificial Intelligence Practical Ideas business series. And I'm joined today by Kirk Eldner, who is the Director of Business Owner Services at Stearns Financial, and Kunal Varshneya, Dr. Varshneya, who is the AI representative for Wavemaker 360 in San Francisco. Swims with a lot of the folks who are working on AI things today. And Wavemaker 360 is one of the leading healthcare venture capital entities in the country focused on the seed early stage round. So welcome, Kunal.
Thanks for having me, Dennis.
And before we get started, I thought it was interesting. Probably all of us get things in our inbox, 5 a day, 10 a day on AI. And McKinsey just dropped one in my box about a meeting they had of chief uh, intelligence and chief technology officers, CIOs and CTOs, who were meeting to discuss the return on investment for AI, how up to now, it's been a little disappointing, but it appears to be getting traction. So I'm curious, Kunal, is that sort of your take on where we are with this whole AI revolution?
Yeah, I appreciate the question, Dennis. I think that's a fair perspective. I think over the last several years, we've developed this incredible technology that we think can really mimic the expertise of professionals, but also do the very repetitive, rudimentary tasks very well in operating a business. And I think what a lot of folks look for when they're implementing these technologies in their workflows is what's going to be my ROI. And it's generally, I think, what limits the ROI of an artificial intelligence is that they're pretty high integration costs. And oftentimes, until recently, wasn't the easiest to implement them into your workflows and still be as productive. But I think over the last couple of years, we've seen a tremendous amount of innovation that allows these very, very sophisticated models that would pretty much only be useful to large companies with pretty high budgets for these tools to be used in very small businesses, or even for solo entrepreneurs to be building out their team leveraging these technologies. I think there has been a changing of the guard in the last year to 18 months or so on that specific front of getting a return on using these technologies.
So how did you get interested in this whole area?
Absolutely. So it's just taking a step back. Artificial intelligence, it's kind of a murky word. Exactly what it means. It's generally a layman's definition of it is essentially any sort of software application that can do tasks that it wasn't explicitly programmed to do. So, for example, Microsoft Outlook isn't, or excuse me, any sort of email browser isn't explicitly coded to do any sort of intelligent tasks. And an AI application, it's coded to do some things, but it can do many other things apart from the specific tasks it was coded to do. So that's what artificial intelligence is. And how I got excited about it is because it's generalized ability to do many things very, very effectively. As a physician, I see a lot of tasks in my workflow that I practically wouldn't like to do. I would like to take care of patients. I wouldn't like to take care of doing all of the charting, all of the billing, all of the rudimentary tasks that frankly I wasn't even trained to do. And I've seen these artificial intelligence technologies that are very, very talented at being able to do these things that would really change my workflow. So I think when I got exposed to this technology, back in its nascent stages in 2016 and 2017, I got pretty excited and I thought it could really change how I practice medicine. And that's how I got interested in it.
uh, Interesting. And I know that your uh, company, Wavemaker, has many, many, many portfolio companies doing things in this area. How many of them would you call practical?
Well, that's a terrific question. Uh, I would say, at the stage that we invest in, just frankly speaking, we're big dreamers. That we look at how healthcare is today, and how technology is today in a bunch of other sectors, and how we want it to be 5 to 10 years from now. And that's kind of how we make bets. That the technology may not make the most sense now. And for example, one of our companies back in 2018, 2019 didn't make any practical sense, to explicitly answer your question, but it was an idea that this is how healthcare would be practiced, 5 to 6 years from now. And, some of those companies that we made bets on that no one really believed in are, 10, $15 million recurring revenue companies now. And it's not to say that we're the best investors. It's just that, we have an insight that this is where technology might be leading healthcare. And this is what might be what the healthcare system 2.0 will be like in 2030 or 2040. And that's kind of how we make bets. But if you look at our portfolio now, about 58 companies, and over the last 12 companies that we've invested in this last year, I genuinely can't imagine that one of our companies is in the pharmacy space, and it's going to absolutely revolutionize how pharmacists at your mom and pop shops or at your hospitals practice taking care of patients. And I'm sure a lot of patients would appreciate that, not having to go to the pharmacy, not having to get their scripts refilled, not having to miss deliveries. But I can't imagine it being successful now, but I really hope it will be in the future. So I would say about, out of our 58 companies in our portfolio, I would say about 30 are practical. They're generating revenue. They're decent businesses. Some have been very, very successful, and some, it's still to be decided if they will be successful and that they are as practical and as, perhaps a little too idealistic from when we decided to invest.
Yeah. So let me ask you a question here, Kunal, because this is one of those things. Dennis and I have talked about this before, but and the concept of the practical ideas of the applications of AI. That is obviously a very powerful point. But one of the things that just seems to me to be really kind of the elephant in the room with business owners is they don't know where to find the good ideas. They don't know where to look and think about what is a good AI idea, right? So you and I have had conversations about the fact that one of the companies you've invested in has this great product that is absolutely solving a huge problem for physicians and all sorts of other support people in the medical space, yet nobody really knows about it. So one of the things I would just kind of just throw out there for a question is, what would you kind of say is happening in helping people understand where these applications are? And Dennis mentioned McKinsey. Well, we get the HBR and McKinsey and all those things. We get those things, but that's headline stuff, right? Mm-hmm. So, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's what I think excites me the most about the last 18 months, because there really has been a revolution in the technology. I would say for this AI has been around for several decades, and it's generally been used by the pure technologists who are in the technology companies. It really hasn't had much penetration into an industry that I work in healthcare. So as you can imagine, the even less tech-enabled industries, it's had even less penetration. Over the last year or so, though, there's been a significant focus on these technologies to get to the consumer. For me and you to be able to use it, not necessarily in our professional day jobs, but in our personal jobs, whether we can go use a commonly used tool now and create a travel itinerary or ask it to book flights, things like that we would rely on a travel agent on or just do ourselves. And now these technologies can do it. To specifically answer your question, it is difficult to stay abreast with all of the new knowledge. What I try to do is, Dennis mentioned, consulting companies often send these reports out, and they can be particularly helpful. They're particularly data driven, which I think is a really, really great tool to leverage. Oftentimes we look at these technologies, we don't know if they're actually going to help us, and they have all of the metrics on ROI or cost of integration, or what percent of small business owners are thinking about it, which is about 30%, and what percent would like to, which is about 50%, and the average cost to implement one of these technologies, which is about $120,000 over the course of 5 years. So it's really not that expensive. But I would say, think about, there's no real specific source of where you can learn about AI. It's obviously just look at anything on the internet right now in technology, and you'll see a lot of AI. But I take a step back and think about now the technology can do pretty much everything for what any person or professional can do, except for the highly intellectual and creative tasks. So if you look through your job and look at any of the really repetitive things, and the classic example is customer service, that you've probably engaged with your customers in a very repetitive way, and most customers have the same issues with your product or service. And they call you and they take time out of your being able to sell to other customers or be able to build your business. And we've got great tools for that that can automate pretty much everything at a very, very low cost and provide a very high experience, high quality experience for your customers. So I would encourage everyone to look at their day-to-day job, look at what tasks are repetitive, whether it's, generating marketing content, doing business analytics, customer service, using tools to predict inventory, all of those types of things. I think they're really cool applications of these technologies in pretty much every day-to-day tasks now.
Yeah, great.
Well, and you can mention individual private companies, since our audience can't invest in those. And if you do happen to mention a public company, just to our audience, that is not a recommendation to buy or sell that company. So are there any particular companies that you think are breakthrough, that have adapted AI, and is it the AI as a supporting cast of other things they're doing, or is it AI as the tip of the spear?
Yeah, so that's a great question, and there's a lot of nuance in your question. So I would say one of the companies that has bridged a lot of the gap of getting the technology from the big tech players all the way to the small businesses and the startups that we invest in on a daily basis is a company called OpenAI. It's a private company that really has revolutionized a lot of this AI technology, and I think the beauty of it is they came out with a product that's almost the year anniversary last November, which said, hey, we've got this great technology, but most Americans, all 340 million of us, can't build a software program to leverage it. So let's bridge that entire software gap. So all you have to do is log onto a website and use a product. And that's their product was ChatGPT, and it's almost, if you've seen the movie Inception, it's almost like that you can ask this highly intelligent software tool, how can, this is my business, how can I implement you in my business? And it will, walk you through very, very specific, very, very business specific use cases for your service. And then you can actually just start using it. They have an enterprise client as well, where you can upload, if you have an inventory spreadsheet or an Excel or a CSV, you can upload it to the program and they can run you all sorts of analytics and provide you great insights. Or you can use it as a customer service tool, as I mentioned. You can use it as a sales tool, as I mentioned. And it's less than $15 a month. This isn't a sales pitch at all for OpenAI. It's a great product, and we use it as investors on a daily basis. I use it, to help me evaluate a company. I'll ask it, what's the market size of automated technologies for physicians, and it'll give me a metric, and it'll do the research for me, and it's making my job much less repetitive, much more intellectual, and I'm sure most folks would like that in their day-to-day. And I think that's one of the companies. And what's the other exciting after that is, they started this, and it's been somewhat of a snowball over the last year, where a lot of companies have realized that consumers want this technology. It's not necessarily, the highly technical software engineer. It's everyone else as well who wants to be leveraging these software tools, and that's what's really exciting for me, to see everyone else use them.
Well, and I saw that up close and personal with one of our clients who is definitely not technology oriented, and she wanted to do due diligence on a particular market segment for her business, and she started with ChatGPT, and she showed me all the different things that she had then asked it, and it was like having a very high priced consultant. Now, there were a few things that were a little funky about its answers, but probably 80% were pretty darn good things to think about in advance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just a quick comment on that. It's funny you say that. The great thing about the technology is what it started out in November, it's a totally different tool now. They're constantly iterating and building on it. So it's your experience every month or so that you use it is going to be better and better and more specific and more nuanced and more professional. But to your point, it's a very large consulting firm recently did this study that they compared their consultants with without the tool and then with the tool. And on average, the consultants were at 45% more productive, and they had never used a software tool before. And their actual quality of work to their end clients was about 61% had a higher approval rating or satisfaction rating. So it's pretty impressive what these tools are doing in all walks of life.
Yeah, which happens to be very close to one of McKinsey's forecasts about what they think it'll do for productivity writ large in the United States and around the world. So we are in close proximity to the seismic event that rocked the AI world. And so what's your take on, the CEO of OpenAI getting essentially escorted out the door, Microsoft then hiring, 700 plus employees of OpenAI said, "Hey, we'll follow you." I mean, it's going to be a movie. We know that.
Absolutely. Yeah, as you can imagine, it's been quite an interesting few days in San Francisco. What seemed like a very normal Friday afternoon really changed the landscape of artificial intelligence as a whole. And it's nice. As of last night, 2 a.m, there's been a pretty impressive resolution back to where we were just a few days ago. I'm happy to walk everyone through that. But essentially, for context, OpenAI, as I mentioned, is one of the largest AI model companies, and their CEO was ousted from the company that he co-founded with a few other very prominent tech folks Friday afternoon from his board. And there was essentially 2 schools of thought in the company, or so it seemed at that time. There was Sam Altman, who was the former CEO, and now I guess again, the current CEO, was a big advocate, as I'd mentioned, of getting this, iterating on this product, developing a great product, and getting it to consumers. And that's great, and that's what he's been able to do over the last several years. On the other side, there's folks in his company that said that AI can be a very dangerous technology. If we continue to iterate, as I mentioned, this technology will get smart enough at some point where it can iterate on itself. And that's, as you've seen, perhaps there's an old Will Smith's movie where the robots get so smart that they get to a level called super intelligence, where they're smarter and, as you can imagine, much more efficient and effective than humans. And that's a scary thought. So there is some concerns, and that's why he was ousted from his company, just because of safety concerns. I think over the last 2 days, when all the analysis that's come out of what actually happened, it really wasn't so much a safety coup. It was more as there's that saying that you shouldn't assume malfeasance when it's just not necessarily just the smartest people making the decisions. And it was just simply a power grab where the board wanted a little more autonomy and influence over the company and how they develop products, and for it not to be as consumer centric. All of that's been resolved. They've got some impressive public company backers that helped them through the process. And Sam's back as CEO, and there's a new board now as of this morning. So that's great for the company, but the OpenAI is really a technology that supports a full market on top of it. There was about $110 billion invested in AI companies in 2023. And all of those companies leverage OpenAI's technology. So it's great that company's back, just so everyone else can go back to using ChatGPT, and we can go back and investing in AI companies as well.
Yeah, well,
Wow.
I guess this is a sign of the times, right? The speed with which all this happened.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. Someone said that the speed of AI innovation is changing so fast, but it looks like so is the culture of boards and companies, that you can oust the CEO and he can be back 2 days later.
So Kunal, maybe I can ask a question here about kind of the foreboding, right? I think one of the things that you hear in the AI, when anybody says AI, is, well, it's the Terminator effect. Eventually somebody will push the button and the world will change completely because the machine is going to take over. But kind of your just general overview of the industry itself, and where are you really thinking? You all are in early stage companies. You see this stuff developing. where are you seeing the emphasis in the growth and the change of the technology at this point?
Yeah, so I spend a lot of time with this technology. It's pretty much my day job of understanding the risks and the benefits and what'll the future look like. And I obviously invest in a very sensitive area like healthcare, where we can't really mess this up. If we're looking for, if I use another, market segment, like customer service, you don't necessarily have to be 100% right every single time. 70% would be okay. In healthcare, you've got to get it right every single time. Otherwise, the hospital or the health system's not going to adopt the technology, or the insurance company is not going to adopt the technology. And obviously physicians won't as well. But I would say candidly, where we're at in healthcare or in artificial intelligence, being concerned about the Terminator effect or the safety effect of what AI is doing is equivalent to caring about overpopulation on Mars. We're very, very far away from AI getting dangerous. And there are some of the smartest people in the world who are spending all of their time not on developing the technology, but developing something called super alignment, which means that eventually when this AI does get smart, we're going to have more than enough scaffolding to make sure that it's aligned with human interests first and foremost. And it's going to augment our productive and our abilities, not be detrimental, or as you said, the Terminator effect. And I think if we didn't have as much, if you look at, I'll use OpenAI as an example, about 20% of the R&D is going to super alignment. It's building this technology, this scaffolding, these AI tools to protect us as a race, as a human race, not so much just to spin and iterate and build the most powerful tool. So I think there's some very smart people building a lot of great safety tools for us that make me much less concerned, because it's the same people building the productive, let's create the world's best technology. And when you put all these people in the room, and that's not the only, there are plenty of other private AI companies that are building great technology. And I think the market effects are great, because some people build a very great tool and some people build a very safe tool, and they compete. And that, those market elements and factors really help. So I think that's what gives me a little more caution, or a little more satisfaction, that the tool is going to be very augmentative to our professional and personal capabilities, not so much detrimental as we often think.
Yeah. Yeah, great.
So when you were getting your medical degree at Stanford, was there any class discussing AI in healthcare?
Yeah, no, there wasn't when I was a first-year medical student, but now there are plenty of venture investors and artificial intelligence technologists, and I actually go off back to class and give a guest lecture or two every now and then, because I think we all recognize that this is going to be one of the more transformative technologies in our generation. We've had over the history, we've had an industrial revolution, or an agricultural revolution, an industrial revolution. We had, in the 90s, we had the internet boom, and then over early 2000s, we got to mobile, and then we had cloud, and now we have AI. And I think that's the scale of the changes in technology and how it'll fundamentally transform. There was a time when we didn't know how to, search something on the internet, and now that's pretty much what we do 15 to 20 times a day. There will be a time, a few years from now, where we don't search anything, where the tool just tells us what we need, and that's going to be how we interface with our technology, how we interface with our day-to-day jobs. And I think that'll have a tremendous impact in a field like healthcare, where we're not really doing too many searches right now. We're still, 5 to 10 years back, where we can't get to use the search engine. We have to, kind of iterate through the electronic medical record ourselves and have a very one-to-one, not scalable interaction with our patients. And I think these tools will bridge that gap significantly. And we are teaching, the physicians of tomorrow that if you don't get well-versed in these technologies at a very young age as a clinician, you're not going to be able to effectively utilize them in your practice. And I think that's something that's not necessarily only true for physicians. I think all of these tools are an acquired taste and an acquired skill set, where you should, adopt them in a very small, low impact use case initially, learn the technology, and then scale it to the rest of your business. And I think that's a lot of what physicians are doing right now, that the lowest hanging fruit is a note-taking service. And then the next step is, the full admin workflow where you can bill with it. And then the next step is, hey, you know what? Maybe they can actually engage with the patient for me while I'm not engaging with them. And it's not to say that I'm not going to see them in my appointment, but say most of you probably only see your physician once every 6 months or once every year, but perhaps you'd want to talk to them more times than that. But they're seeing, 2,000 other patients, but now they've got this chat bot that can engage with you at his or her level, and provide you all your questions and concerns in a very cost-effective, scalable way. So I think that's what we're trying to teach the former, the future medical students and physicians, but I think those teachings apply to many other disciplines as well.
Well, as almost anybody who has tried to navigate the healthcare system would attest to, there needs to be some innovation in that system. And for our audience, please use the Q&A feature on this Zoomcast if you have a question for our guest or for any of us. So AI and blank, blank, blank. One of the things that many of the folks that we talk to in the business community particularly want to try to figure out, where should I connect it? And it seems like where many of them are connecting it, the stories we hear, are they load in an email and ChatGPT punches it up, or they ask ChatGPT to make it more empathetic, or and not that those aren't important things, because there certainly have been a lot of miscues via email because you miss all the human interaction. There's that famous one of the Fortune 10 companies where two of the senior executives were like at each other's throats, and they misunderstood each other's emails because it didn't have the same texture as human communication. So I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but what are some of the other things that you're seeing that a company can do? How would you identify a punch list or brainstorm a punch list of things that AI might be helpful on?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, and it's funny how we've evolved. I think that use case that you described was a very common one that people were thinking about. How can I use this in my day-to-day? And the earliest example was for basic communications, where, hey, I don't want to type the same email over and over again, or I don't want to do this repetitive task over and over again. Let me just ask ChatGPT or input your other AI tool and have it draft it for me. Just on that point, now we're looking at, the next generation, which is going to come out in the next couple of months. You can integrate your email with it with pretty much a couple clicks. And based on all of your other email interactions and how you interface with your customers, with your colleagues, it'll pre-draft pretty much every email for you. So it's pretty much replacing your day-to-day communication, so you can do what, the other things you like to do best. And I just like to note, I talk about a lot of the optimisms and the exciting parts about AI. There are some concerns that I would like to mention. One of them is you're providing a lot of your data and a lot of your, internal communications to a tool. And inherently for every one of these tools, they have to learn on data. So they take that data and store it somewhere. And that's always something that you should be, somewhat concerned about. We're talking right now about finance, and I obviously spend a lot of time in healthcare, where data is a very unique and very private and sensitive thing to patients. And a lot of them would, regardless of how great the tool is and how much it changes their life, may not want to share their data. So I think it's always something you should know, and always a question you should ask for anyone who's trying to sell you an AI tool or trying to integrate in your workflow, or you're asking them to integrate in your workflow. What are they doing with your data? It should be a known risk for you that your data might be shared, not necessarily shared with someone else, just shared with the model, for the model to get better for you, but it is being stored somewhere. And I think that's always something that people should look for. But more, back to your question, Dennis, about specific use cases. I would say, think about the repetitive tasks in your day job. And for me, I didn't really know what my repetitive tasks were. Sometimes I had to look at what other people were doing in my field and say, oh, wow, they set up the same. I do about 10 to 12 calls a day. And just the 5 or 6 clicks that I have to do to schedule those calls, it's not necessarily the most intense thing, but you know what? I thought I could replace that. And it saves me about 20 minutes a day. It's not significant. Hopefully at some point, the chat model would be able to take the first conversation with a startup or a founder, and that would really be able to scale my expertise, because I screen a lot of companies. I see about 500 or 600 companies a year, and we only invest in about 5. So a lot of those companies, I didn't have to be in those meetings. And it's only something you can, take a step back and see the repetitive tasks where you're wasting your expertise, or you're not leveraging the most output from your expertise. And that's where a tool can be very useful. To your first question about, yes. To your first question about ROI, I think it's always something we should think about as professionals. It's like, what's the best way to get an ROI for my time? And perhaps, Dennis, for you, it's, talking with some of your most important clients and seeing what you can do for them and how you can provide them more services. For me, it's, the companies that we've invested in and scaled up, how can we support them more? And it's not necessarily all the other tasks. So I think when you take a step back and look at that, and what are your highest resource and highest ROI tasks, for all the other things, perhaps implement an AI and just be a little creative, because I think the technologies can do quite a lot these days.
Well, and I'm struck by how we're seeing it being used in small, medium, and larger companies, and also by what you just described as be careful where your data is going. Some of those companies are cracking down and saying, do not upload sensitive things to Chat GPT. Now, my understanding is that, assuming you use Microsoft Outlook, but I think Google's working on this too, is that as those tools get integrated, like you mentioned, that is happening imminently in the future, that they're going to have safety protocols around that. But we don't know all the safety protocols that Chat GPT has. And, when you get into the drama that happened this last weekend, you wonder, how many walls do they have up on that data? So good point.
Yeah, and it's the beauty of market effects are, there are plenty of companies building in this space. I'll just use one example. It's a private company called Mosaic ML that said, exactly your concerns, where a lot of, business owners don't want to share their data. It's perhaps the most valuable thing about them. It's, their secret sauce, or maybe they just don't want to share it. And they created these highly secure third-party environments to be able to leverage these tools. And that was, they now have been acquired for a couple $2 billion by another company. But it showed, the tremendous value of data security and these little playgrounds where you as an enterprise can leverage these technologies in a safe and effective way. So there are a lot of folks trying to build in and create these environments so that people can be using and getting the most out of these technologies in the future as well.
Well, and that brings up an interesting question around using consultants. And we have a few of our business clients kind of pulling their hair out on this one right now, is the consultants are coming out of the woodwork saying, we can help you to unleash the productivity, brainstorm, develop the tools, and so forth. I get probably 3 a day trying to say, hey, we can help your clients. How would you interview somebody? Is it just old school questions of who are you working with and talking to those people and making sure that they're, real? What are the steps to try to interview a consultant in this field?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And it's funny you mentioned that it's getting harder and harder to figure out, who's a machine and who's a person in this space, especially if it's someone saying that they want to help you leverage one of these AI technologies. We're not too far away from the AI being able to tell you themselves that we want to help you leverage myself in your workflow. I think the couple things that I would mention is that a lot of people have been thrown into or walked into the AI space in the last year, and they see a great market opportunity to use these technologies for other folks and use these technologies themselves. But I would caution that there are a lot of folks working on borrowed knowledge, that they hear one thing from someone else and they try to regurgitate it to someone else and try to make a quick buck on that. So I think, there are not any too specific questions I can offer to people, but I think one of the most useful things is to really try to understand the breadth of their knowledge and the depth of it. And the breadth, I think you can get a little better idea just based on, that's a little more of the headlines, the use cases that a lot of folks can rattle off and say, these are the tremendous amount of benefits that you can get. I think you can see someone's understanding when they can describe very astutely the risks of using these tools, and I think that shows you their technical understanding of the implications of using such a tool. And most of the folks who are working on board knowledge, who may not be the best consultants for you and your business, will be able to tell you all of the wonderful things ChatGPT can do, but will not tell you, what is the model actually doing and how is it actually doing this? Those are two very simple questions that any technologist can very, very quickly answer. How ChatGPT was trained, what are the specific things it can do, what are the specific things it can't do, and it's not just a 50-50 thing. There's some things that can do very, very well. There's some things it can't do very well, and I'll just, for example, it's impressive, the content generation and the creativity that ChatGPT and other of these tools have. So if you're using it for, marketing, for copy generation, it's particularly effective. You can describe it a few things about your business, and it can create, a great marketing campaign in a multimodal, so in imaging, in video, and in text. But sometimes, if you ask it to make business decisions for you, it's not very good at that, and it's trained to not be good at that because it doesn't want people making full business decisions on this tool. And that was the technologist making this a safe and effective thing. But if a consultant comes up and asks you, it can, totally revolutionize how you change your business or how you perform your business, and you can ask it and it'll tell you all of the things you should do. It won't necessarily be able to do that very effectively. It'll give you very high level advice, such as lower your costs, improve your revenue, become a more efficient business. That's not very helpful business advice. I think everyone on this call knows that. And I think it's trained to do that. So those are the few of the things that I would comment on that can make it, help you diligence a effective and ineffective consultant.
So if I could just throw another question in here, Kunal, one of the things that is you mentioned is low-hanging fruit. And I think, you mentioned your scheduling as being, 20 minutes a day, but 20 minutes a day makes a difference. Mm-hmm. And I suspect that, we have folks in the audience that are listening that would ask, how do I identify what low-hanging fruit actually is, right? What are the things that I need characteristically to say to myself, this might be something I could use artificial intelligence for in general terms? Have you got kind of a short list or a thinking process on that generally for folks when you're talking to them?
Yeah, so I typically try to, I ask them a few things about what their day-to-day is like, just so I can get a better picture. I think a few of the things that apply to most folks that I've kind of commented on in this call is, most folks are engaging in some sort of a customer service workflow, and I think that's a great use case, and that might even be not necessarily a low-hanging fruit. It could be like a mid to high-hanging fruit based on how important that is to you. And for some folks, like for a physician, customer service, which is engaging with your patient, is the highest of hanging fruits. So I think that's one. We've seen a lot of innovation in generative AI and being able to create. It almost sounds science fiction-y, but it's the truth that you can leverage these tools now to create a voice that's exactly like yours. So your customer will think that it's you, and you have to give the disclosure that this is an AI right now, this isn't you. But after the second or third sentence, they're not going to care. They're getting you on the phone. They're answering, the tool's answering at the same fidelity that you probably are, if not better. And this call can go on for 24 hours. You probably don't want to be on the call with your customer for 24 hours, but these tools and these robots, they can create an infinite number of you, again, for very, very low cost. So I think customer service is one. I think one of the things that I see a lot of recently, especially in the finance and the accounting side, is you can upload an Excel spreadsheet and it can run your P&L or your balance sheet. It can give you all of the analytics that otherwise you would maybe require a consultant to do, or someone who's very, very talented at all of the Excel formulas. I've started to use that in my own financial modeling, and I know a lot of businesses have spreadsheets and all of their accounting in your standard spreadsheet. So that's something that I do, and when I say you can ask it questions, I literally mean you can ask it questions that you can, and that's the beauty of the new tools, you can engage with it in a free form, natural language. So that's in comparison to if you use any one of the spreadsheet products, you have to type in a formula with a equals, if, else to do the calculation. You probably don't want to interface with your data that way. You would like to do is like, hey, what were my profits last year? What was my month over month profit growth or my cost growth? What are my COGS? What are the trends? What are my margins looking like? You can ask these questions in a free form like any other human would interact with a human, but the machine can interface that into programming language, do all the analytics, and then pop out an answer back to you in that free form context that me and you can understand. So I think there's a lot of accounting, financial opportunities here as well for folks.
Yeah, great. And I think those are very practical. I think that there's not a single person on here that doesn't feel, particularly the financial piece, I think is a really, really big benefit.
So how far are we away from Jarvis? For those of you who've seen the Iron Man movies, where Jarvis is just this disembodied thing that you just talk to, and it helps you do stuff.
Yeah, no, it's funny. There's some companies building tools called Jarvis now as well. So they've borrowed perhaps the copyright or the trademark from Iron Man to build this tool that can help you totally on the consumer side. So your day-to-day life of, ordering the things you need from your e-commerce tool to making your scheduling to making your appointments to giving you feedback on what you should wear based on the weather. We've got some of these like fragmented tools, from ordering, interfacing with your devices to now these professional ones. I think one of the big limitations for a Jarvis to become to our life is just inherently the lack of integration of all of our tools. I think most of us use a computer and a laptop and a not tech enabled car and something else. So it's hard for one of these AI tools to kind of engulf everything in our ecosystem. But there are a few companies that are, looking and to build a phone, a computer, a car, and then at that point, an AI that kind of engulfs all of that would be pretty reasonable. I think on the AI side, and not just the ecosystem integration of devices side, I think we're still decently far away from a Jarvis-like tool for it to be effective. I think we're going to have many Jarvis. No, I don't want to say a fake version of Jarvis, but not nearly as effective as Tony Stark's Jarvis, where they can respond to you in real time and give you some useful ideas, but there's not inherently very intelligent. And Dennis, your question is actually a very philosophical one about the AI climate right now, where Jarvis from the movie would be something what we call as artificial general intelligence. So it's not artificial intelligence for one specific customer segment or one specific market segment. Like we have a lot of those now. Those are artificial specific intelligences. When we get to a time where you have AGI, which is what a lot of these companies are looking to build, it's a tool that can generalize its knowledge base to pretty much every sector. And that's kind of an innate quality that humans have, that we've learned how to pick up something and put something down in some space, and we can apply that to something else very effectively, very quickly. It's a particularly hard thing for a machine to do. So I think, we're perhaps, I would say in the next 10 years, we'll see something like that. I think there are a lot of very exciting opportunities there, but I'm hopeful. I would love to. I remember when I grew up seeing Iron Man, so I'd love to see that in my day-to-day at some point.
Well, and so this is where the non-Terminator, but still kind of spooky futures come into play. One of our clients who runs a major company said, I want Jarvis, and I want Jarvis to be able to help me figure out, and now they're mostly B2B, and they're in a supply chain of a lot of companies. And so he wants Jarvis to help them figure out how to do better shopping within their supply chain, how to be, more efficient, more effective, get better terms, maybe find suppliers that they don't have right now. And so his punchline to all of this is, my vendor stream better up their game. If they stay static, they're going to be toast. And I thought to myself, okay, that's interesting. And by the way, he's not at the top of the supply chain himself. So he's trying to stay relevant in this brave new world. So
yeah, I love that, and I'll just make a quick comment there. That a lot of folks get concerned with, will AI replace their jobs, or will AI replace their business? And I think that's really overblown. But I do think the honest truth is exactly what you said, Dennis. That AI isn't going to replace you, but someone using AI will replace you. And everyone's got slightly different learning curves with AI, or technical comfort. But we're being forced in our society to become more technical and more technically sound. And I think that's a great thing for society, for a productivity sake, for growth of the economy, for, better jobs for all of us and higher earning jobs for all of us. But that would be my comment there, that right now, I think we've got a couple of years where, you can avoid AI in your work streams. I think your supply chain point's a great one. I think a lot of people are leveraging into that space and just, figuring out how to run their businesses more efficiently, and just genuinely asking the AI to be able to do that. But I think at some point within the next year or two, we're going to have to make those decisions. And I see it on the physician side that right now a physician can see maybe 15 to 20 patients a day, where some of their colleagues with AI will be able to see 40 or 50. Now, as the health system, which physician do you want? The one that can take care of so many patients, or the one who is still, drudging through 10 to 15? And I know it's a very strange way to look at medicine, but as an investor and as a physician as well, I want to see as many patients as possible to take care of as many sick people. I don't want people waiting for 3 to 4 months, and that applies to vendors, that applies to customers, in all different sectors. So that's the future. I think we've got some time there, so I'm not wanting to scare anyone, but it's a good thing to think about it now, so you can be well prepared 18 to 24 months from now.
well, and particularly in a hospital environment, I recall one of our clients who was one of the country's top heart surgeons, and he had a health issue himself, and he had to go to let's call it an unnamed but very famous medical facility. And all of a sudden, all these segways came running down the hallway, and the chief resident and the main doc, they were at the lead, and then there were all the other ones behind, and they all had iPads. And then he watched as they had this big open area. They all went in a circle like a wagon train and shared patient information. And he said, I'll be gosh darned if I want somebody who's more technically oriented actually looking out for me. Now, doctors are notoriously the worst patients and surgeons. So, but that just sort of gets to the, when will technology just be in the background and not in your face? And many of our cars now, the technology is in the background. So we can't get off this call without talking about the new AI pen that just went on sale by Humane. And so it's sort of like your Star Trek badge. And it's got a little bit of a Jarvis-esque quality there. So what's your take on that one, Kunal?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think, just for everyone else who isn't familiar with Humane, it's a recently announced device that you can clip like to your breast pocket in a suit, or to a clip to your collar in a shirt. And essentially it has a video and a projector device. It's very small. It's about the size of half a deck of cards. And it records your entire day, and you can interface with it like you interface with any of your other voice-based apps. And you can ask it, a bunch of questions. But it's the great thing about Humane is the product is that it's videoing your entire day in short bursts, and understanding what's going on using computer vision, which is a type of AI model, to give you better insights. And I think for most folks right now, and I'm part of the AI generation, where I was part of a time where, there was no AI, and I'm seeing a lot, and I'm definitely a little concerned about this. Not so much for myself, but if I imagine everyone else, having one of these tools, they're constantly recording me. So I think there are some concerns there with and it's not necessarily my friends recording me, it's someone in a coffee shop, I'm on their humane device and they're on my humane device. I don't know if that's necessarily what we want for the future of society, but it's pretty impressive that you can ask it questions about your day. You can ask it, things that you can do in your day slightly differently. One of the cooler things, if anyone here has lost their wallet, you can ask it and it'll tell you exactly where it is, just based on, it saw where you put it down a few hours ago, or other things in your day-to-day like that. And this is their first iteration of their product. They've been working on it for several years now. They've raised a lot of money to build it. I know the next iterations of their product will have professional capabilities as well, where you can ask it to schedule your meetings, and it can do that because it's integrated with all of your software. It's all of the other tools you use. You can ask it to call people. It's a totally hands-free device, which I think is another big part of what makes it impressive as well. You're not pressing any buttons. It's just always listening and always attached to you and always watching. So it's part of the future. I live in the Silicon Valley, and we're generally early adopters for a lot of these technologies, and it's still somewhat controversial here. So I imagine it's very controversial for everyone else. So yeah, but it's one of the things that excites me is that we're pushing the frontiers of this technology. And we're gonna, humane's gonna have to be around for a few years to change the consumer sentiment. Right now we're a little freaked out. 2 to 3 years from now, we won't be as freaked out because we'll see a lot of these humane devices. Just like, several years ago, autonomous self-driving vehicles really scared everyone. And I think everyone's seen a self-driving vehicle or one of these very tech-enabled vehicles on the streets now and feel pretty comfortable by it and don't feel that they're gonna just collide with you. So that's a great part for society and technologists alike.
Yeah, so I have a lot of questions and little time, as we know here. So, the one question I would ask you is I think from your perspective, is there an industry that you think is using AI more efficiently than any other industry? Obviously, the healthcare space is really getting into it, and for a lot of great reasons. But would you say there is one space that kind of stands out in your mind?
I would, it's not one space, but well, there are a few, but I would say most of the business analytics, I think they've been using different versions of AI for a long time. Whether it's on supply chain, on inventory management, and that's a different kind. It's called discriminative AI, where it can provide you insights into your data. I think what we're starting to see a big transition now. I mentioned a few, but where you can engage with other people using these tools. So a very common application now is all of your HR tasks. So recruiting talent, retaining talent, interfacing and onboarding talent. We're seeing a lot of use there, which is not necessarily a vertical segment, but we're starting to see it horizontally among a lot of folks. Instead of having to find the potential targets to hire yourself, the tools can do that. The tools can interface with that in a very humanistic way and take them through the interview process. They still have to interview with people in your company. We can't replace that, and I don't think we should replace that. But at some point, a lot of that workflow can be automated and is being automated. So we're seeing a lot in that space. And frankly, the finance has been one of the early adopters, financial services as a sector. They were the earliest adopters in fraud detection with transactions, and that's one of the most ROI-based AI tools. I think the analytics component applies there pretty well in there as well. But business-to-business SaaS has seen perhaps the most adoption of these AI tools.
Right.
Yeah, we have a number of CEO and CFOs who are using that as a better way to make sure that nothing untoward is happening within their own company. Fraud detection. Yeah. So one of the things you would not expect to have in the same sentence is artificial intelligence and a senior walker. And yet you guys have one of those, and explain how that even works.
Yeah, so the company Dennis is referring to is one of our portfolio companies called Camino Robotics. And this goes back to Dennis, one of your earlier questions, and how practical some of our investments are. Well, we like to take the long approach on this, and when we looked at how elderly folks or folks with any sort of disabilities or walking impediments were going about their daily lives, we looked at the technology that they're using. And for any of you who have used a walker or have seen someone using a walker, they haven't really changed much in the last 60 years. I think the biggest innovation was that we added a few tennis balls at the two front parts to get better traction, so the walkers wouldn't slide. And if just taking a step back, one of the biggest risks for someone with a walker, and why we give them walkers, is fall prevention. And anyone above the age of 65, if you do have a fall, it's almost a death sentence, where you can fracture a hip, you will be admitted to the hospital for a few weeks, and the outcomes are very, very bad after a hip fracture for anyone at that age. And the healthcare resource utilization is tremendously high as well. So, but these people were incredibly able-bodied, very healthy, and it can be an inflection point in someone's life. So that was why we spent. This is definitely a desperate need for a solution like this, where these walkers are great. They keep people able, upright, but if they're mobile, it's not really nearly as helpful as one would think. And we invested in this company called Camino Robotics, which is, as Dennis mentioned, it's a very AI-enabled and AI-powered walker, which sounds ridiculous. I absolutely agree with you. But essentially, it has numerous sensors around the device that can understand the structure of the ground. So if you're walking on wood, if you're walking on concrete, if you're walking on asphalt, and it can change the traction levels. So it's very specific to the surface you're walking on. It also is very specific to how much your weight, your height, the force you're generating, plus all of these things factor into fall prevention. And we've seen with this device, the risk of falls has gone down, and the ratio of falls have gone down significantly with people who use it. Now, the concern, as you can imagine, or not concern, what's limiting Camino is it's very expensive in comparison to your standard walker. But if you look at it, not specifically from the specific purchase point, whether it's a few $100s to a couple $1,000s, if you look at it over the course of the lifetime of a walker, obviously these walkers can last a very, very long time. But it's also, you're preventing all of the hospitalizations, and more significantly, you're preventing all of the impacts to the patients, which we think make it a very exciting opportunity. And it's like one of those tools that if everyone who has ever used a walker and been frustrated with a walker gets exposed to Camino Robotics, they'll be like, wow, this is incredible. I wish my parent or wish myself had this tool, because it would have prevented so much pain and suffering, which we hope, over the next year to two, we can get that sort of viral growth with the company. But that's Camino Robotics, very interesting, as you mentioned, AI walker situation. But we love the team. They've built something that we think adds a lot of value, and we hope they're successful.
Yeah, well, I suppose if you can do what you just described, then the sky's the limit in terms of brainstorming on ways that AI can be adapted to whatever we're doing, personally or professionally.
Indeed.
So we're about out of time. Any closing comments, Kunal?
Yeah, well, Dennis, and Kurt, really appreciate you both having me on today to chat with some folks about leveraging AI and implementing it in your workflows and your companies. I think it's a great technology, and I think there will be a tremendous amount of enterprise value created among sectors. I love healthcare, but I think there's a great opportunities vertically and horizontally in many different disciplines. I would encourage everyone to just, and I do this to my friends, my parents, anyone really who hasn't seen technology, spend a little time on the websites. There are many of them out there. You can just look at AI chatbot or generative AI chatbot, and you can ask it what it can do for you. And it's probably smarter than me, or definitely smarter than me, based on what I just talked about today. And it can give you all of the use cases that can help you. And I hope you have a great journey with AI, and looking forward to connecting with everyone again soon.
Well, thank you. And I know that many of our audience have not connected with the healthcare aspects of AI. So that piece in particular, stay tuned. a lot to come. Again, thank you all. Thank you, Kurt. Thank you, Kunal. And thanks to our audience, and wishing everyone a happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.